And that's what we did, and we've had a relationship with Bradley Walsh ever since. And it's connections, people within people. Vince, Mick Everett. I'm thinking I must have left something at the Valley. What you've just offered to Jason, can you do for the rest of the club? And I think, actually, Mick, I can, and I can probably make it. This world is a volume world, so if there's more volume, I can probably make it better for everybody involved. You better turn around then. And then you start meeting people within Charlton, like you had to sort Alan Curbishley's car out. You had to sort Mervyn Day's car out. Which you do, and that connects you with other people. Gavin Peacock, who at the time was an ex-Chelsea player, with Cascarino, who was an ex-Chelsea player. Gavin picks Cascarino up, go off to an event at Chelsea, and Cass says, "Where'd you get this car from?" Alan Curbishley leaves Charlton. Alan Pardew goes in at Charlton. Vince, will you go and sort Alan Pardew's car out? Go and sort Alan Pardew's car out. That then revolves to Alan Pardew's manager, a guy called Barry Neville. Barry Neville introduces you to Teddy Sheringham. Teddy Sheringham says, "Why should I deal with you? You know, I can't answer that. Maybe you should ask Cass." And continues to tell me that you, particularly in the motor trade, well, that's how it affects us, that you never take anything for granted. You've always got to look down the track at what's coming. I think he's really pleased with how the business has gone on and grown, that he helped us, start.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Couldn't have done it without him.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey.
And with previous connections, I hit the ground running. One order did my year's target. So I hit the ground running, and I loved working for Rivervale. It was a great job.
That's interesting. I want to touch on there about, like, you mentioned about the connections, and like you shared a couple of stories with me offline. I was at an event where you was having a chat with Tony Cascarino, and was done the Best of British thing, and like over the years, some of those connections that you've built, Bradley Walsh, I guess, people like that, and how has all that sort of come about, just by you being out and about and meeting them people too?
So Rivervale lost a Mercedes dealer in December 2000.
Right.
It was a massive shock to the system. It was not their own doing. They didn't deserve to lose the franchise for the area. Mercedes had a reshuffle where Mercedes themselves wanted all the dealerships inside the M25. So the way they were going to get all those dealerships inside the M25 was to give a huge sweetener to the businesses that were in the M25 and give them an area outside of the M25.
Right.
So Sussex got given to HRO in, and Tommy Sopwith, who's another, we'll probably touch on him a bit later. What a character, most charismatic man I've ever met. Quickly followed by your good self, but he was the most charismatic man, Sam. Unreal. So December 2000, this announcement got made, and a shudder went through the business, and I thought, I don't want to work for a PLC again. I'd had that experience when my latter days of working at Vauxhall, and I just didn't know where I was going to go again. I was at another juncture, which what was going to open up next. And a guy came in from Lombard North Central, or Lombard Vehicle Management, or whatever it was called. Let's just sit and have a chat with him. And he said, "What are you going to do now then, Vince?" I said, I don't know. I love this job. This is the best job I've ever had.
Yeah.
But I like a business that relates to you as a person rather than a number on a payroll sheet. And he said, "Why don't you go working for yourself?" And he said, "You can have the Lombard system. I'll sign you up to the Lombard system. Therefore, you don't just have to supply Mercedes anymore. You can supply Mercedes and anything else on our system." And so it sounded quite appealing.
Yeah.
So I said to him, "Well, what have I got to have that?" And he said, you've got to have a consumer credit licence, which when you look at FCA registration and stuff today, Sam, of how rigorous FCA registration is, in those days, as long as you had a clean credit history, you could get a consumer credit licence for 35 quid. And that was it, you were done. Consumer credit licence and a VAT number, of which I had neither. So that weekend, I'm sitting with Dad, and Dad asked the same question, what are you going to do? I've been offered this. He said, why aren't you going to do it then? I said, well, I don't have a consumer credit licence or a VAT number. And he said, well, I've got both of them. And he said Dad was doing what we call trading. So he was trading, buying cars from one dealer and selling it to another and all this sort of stuff. And he said, why don't we get a little office, and you can do what you do best, one side of the office, and I'll do what I do best, the other side of the office. So in May 2001, that's what we did. We set up this little business called Eagle Oak Vehicle Contracts. I reluctantly left Rivervale. It was the best job I'd had. And then going out on the big wide world. Now that is another challenge when you eat what you kill. Really, you know, in that world, you've got to write business. If you don't write business, you've got no money coming in. You got nothing. Again, we hit the ground running with it, and on this, I'm getting to this, Sam. Probably stay with me. So I'm sat there. We had the little office opposite the Thomas and Beckett in Worthing. Lovely little office. Yeah. And I get a phone call from the guy who used to be my previous boss, who'd given me the job at Rivervale. He was a big Charlton Athletic fan. And he says to me, there's a guy at Charlton wants to speak about cars, but they're not Mercedes, so we can't really do anything. Do you want to go and have a chat with him on the understanding that if he wants Mercedes, you'll get them from us? Of course I will. So I go and I drive up to the Valley. I meet a guy called Jason Morgan, who's gone on to be an MBE, who looks after their Charlton Athletic Community Trust. Yeah. Again, amazing individual and character. Yeah. Just energy is unreal. And a guy called Mick Everett, who at the time was the operations director. And I sit there in the Valley in like a little meeting room with them, and I explain what I can do for them. They're talking about supplying vehicles just to the community trust. Half a dozen vehicles, I think it was. So I explained to them what we can do. And Mick Everett doesn't say a word. And for those people who know Mick Everett, they'll understand what I mean. And Mick Everett doesn't say a word. And he looks at you and he sort of growls at you a bit, really, in a way, even though he is the loveliest fella and he's a really good friend of mine and I love him dearly. I didn't know at that point that he didn't bite. And he sort of growls at you a bit in a way, and you do what you do and you shake their hands and you go out the door thinking, well, let's see what happens. And then I get on the A2 driving back and the phone rings in your car, and in those days your phone was in a cradle. Yeah. Didn't really have caller display, just the numbers come up, so I answered it. And Vince, Mick Everett. I'm thinking I must have left something at the Valley. What you've just offered to Jason, can you do for the rest of the club? And I think, actually, Mick, I can, and I can probably make it, this world is a volume world, so if there's more volume, I can probably make it better for everybody involved. You better turn around then. Back to the Valley, and we do this thing. And Charlton Athletic order 35, 40 vehicles or whatever it was back then, and we supply them all to them. We have an arrangement of getting a box so many times a year and that. And then you start meeting people within Charlton, like you had to sort Alan Curbishley's car out, you had to sort Mervyn Day's car out, which you do, and that connects you with other people. And then Alan Curbishley's, one of his assistant managers was a guy called Roy Peacock. No, not Roy Peacock. God, that's awful, and I can't remember his name. I'll have to find that in a minute for you. But God, that's really got me. But his son was Gavin Peacock, who was
of course.
So he put me in touch with Gavin Peacock. Gavin Peacock, who at the time was an ex-Chelsea player, with Cascarino, who was an ex-Chelsea player. Gavin picks Cascarino up, go off to an event at Chelsea, and Cass says, where'd you get this car from? So Gavin tells him where he gets the car from. So you start talking to Cascarino. Alan Curbishley leaves Charlton. Alan Pardew goes in at Charlton. Vince, will you go and sort Alan Pardew's car out? Go and sort Alan Pardew's car out. That then revolves to Alan Pardew's manager, a guy called Barry Neville. Barry Neville introduces you to Teddy Sheringham. Teddy Sheringham says, "Why should I deal with you?" Now I knew that Cass and Ted had played together at Millwall.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, you know, I can't answer that, but maybe you should ask Cass." "What, you deal with Cass?" Yeah, I look after Cass. So they speak, and then you start doing that, and it just revolves. And Barry Neville was quite a big part of that. That Barry then rings you and says, "Bradley's looking for a car. He wants to do a bit of a deal with you, but Bradley's looking for a car," and that's what we did. And we've had a relationship with Bradley Walsh ever since. And it's connections, people within people. It's
Mate, you know what? I love listening to stories like that. Like for me, like we've got our county business clubs thing up there, and it says one of our main things that come out of people by people. No matter what you're doing, I'm such a strong believer in that. And if you're a good person and you do things in the right way, and you're able to build those relationships as you do, that's what it's about, isn't it? And that's how those, like you said, there's always going to be that then referral and that. That's the man you deal with. Go and speak to Vince. And
but they're no different, Sam. They want something, and they want someone to help them get it.
Yeah.
I suppose the bit is that they're probably the higher profile they are. They're a little bit more wary and a little bit untrusting to start with until they get to know you.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had some fantastic experiences with those guys, and even to the point of my youngest daughter, who works with us at the minute, ended up really bizarrely in Teddy Sheringham's lounge singing to his family on a Saturday morning. How does that ever happen? But you know, he was absolutely brilliant with her. I'm so privileged to have those sort of relationships and still keep them. And
that's an amazing journey. Look, I'm keen to know what's that conversation with your dad, like 2008, and around that. What's his take on all of this and where you are now and what you've achieved with Rivervale? And
well, Dad always keeps my feet firmly on the ground. I think I may have said to you before, you know, some people look at it and consider you to be entrepreneurial, whatever the definition of an entrepreneur is. And for me, it's what can I come up with next, what can I create, what can I bolt on, what will improve our business model.
Innovate, and more entrepreneurs innovate, don't we? I guess that's one of the things,
But Dad at that point wanted to slow it down a little bit anyway, so it sort of made perfect sense. Dad had helped us get along the way, and then Dad went back to doing what he did before. Suffered with a couple of health issues since, but that doesn't stop Dad. Dad still knows how to make £1 into £2. And I often joke with him that if you dropped a tenner, he'd manage to catch it before it hits the floor. Dad's very clever at those sort of things, and he does keep my feet firmly on the ground. And has taught me and continues to tell me that particularly in the motor trade, well, that's how it affects us, that you never take anything for granted. You've always got to look down the track at what's coming. That can create challenges, but it also creates opportunities. So I think he's really pleased with how the business has gone on and grown. That he helped us, start.
It's amazing.
Couldn't have done it without him.